Hello. Check one, check two. Hello, hello. How's everyone doing? I think I'm connected. Evening, Sarah, or afternoon, depending where you're tuning in from. Thank you for joining. Let me know if you can hear me, everyone. What's good? Katrina, lovely to have you here. You can't miss today. That's good. Today will be a good session. PVGM. I don't know how to say that. It's probably how it's probably nothing. It's probably exactly that. Sorry. So hello, bro. Zehoven, yo. Can I offer an observation, DH? Well, straight in there with the requests. Go ahead. Since we're not started yet, you may as well. Khalid, Roman, audio's good, fantastic. Brilliant. So everyone can hear me okay. And yeah, we got 23 people in on the live stream, so I think we can get cooking. I don't want to spend too long on the intro. Paul, I'll remember that in future. I didn't want to spend too long in the intro because today's live stream is going to be, as you can see on the screen, an introductory lesson in hieroglyphs. And once again, we'll just be kind of reacting to videos. I've selected 3 videos that I thought were particularly good. And when I say this is an introductory lesson to hieroglyphs, this is literally like basics, my first Medu ntr, my first Egyptian hieroglyphs. Yeah, so this is like really basic stuff. So if you're advanced, you know, if you're an archer, if you're, you know, a regular on Smash Rockwell's channel, this is going to be really low level stuff for you. Okay, so just bear that in mind. This is for the masses, but I also think I found these videos valuable. That's why I selected them. I thought, oh, these are quite good. This is a nice introduction in terms of just kind of getting to know the way it works. Debunk Wallace Budge. I wouldn't do that. Maybe you got to tell me something that's going to make me want to debunk him. Obviously, I know he's in that age of Egyptology that tried to separate, you know, what weren't very accepting, but in many ways, Wallace Budge, you know, they don't like his translation of the hieroglyphs because he used indigenous African languages to do his decipherment. And actually, a lot of people, including myself, think that his translation was pretty good. So I don't know, but there's probably a very deep kind of conspiratorial story behind that, all that's going over my head there. So you probably know more than me about whether or not Wallace Budge needs to be debunked. But I used Wallace Budge's books were my introduction into hieroglyphs, and I think his introductory book into hieroglyphs is really excellent, to be totally honest with you. So I don't know what to do with that. How Bantu, especially with the class system, kind of resemble Afro-Asiatic. Yeah, well, this is Darth. I'm just going to put that. I'm going to put that comment on the screen quickly. Jonathan, thank you very much for your $10 donation. I really appreciate it. You do enough, and I appreciate the fact that you also support the channel. I'm just going to put this comment up. He says, it's curious how Bantu, especially with the class system, kind of resembles the way Afro-Asiatic languages conjugate their verbs. Yeah. A lot of people don't know, like the pure Bantu languages, from what I can see, they have, you know, a really strong similarity with other languages on the Nile Valley. And we haven't explored Egypt from that, or at least Africa from that perspective. We're still using Greenberg's outdated language films, and I myself am guilty of that. And I think we need an entire revision. There's another content creator called Kamjiverse, and he's done some really good research into Obenga's Theophila Benga and Sheikh Anta Diop's language films, and I think they had one called Negro Egyptian, which basically related to most of the spoken and written languages in Africa. I haven't read that book because I don't think there's an English translation. I still think it's only available in French. I would love to read Theophila Benga's book and get my head around the way he and Sheikh Anta Diop classified the ancient Egyptian language alongside the other African languages, because I do feel like Greenberg's language films that we use tend to do more damage than good. So it'd be interesting to see that. Jonathan has said, okay, got my paper and pen. Good stuff. I think we're going to get started soon. I'm just going to quickly have a quick peek in. By the way, let me just see what DH said here. It's quite interesting. We're going to get a lot of this today. This is my only observation. Metu in Aramaic, sorry, in Amharic, not Aramaic. In Amharic means they came. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a video in, I think, a couple of live streams time where we're going to be looking at the relationship between Proto-Bantu language film and Medu ntr, which is very, very strong. I also know that there's another creator called Tiawete, who relates the Medu ntr to, I think, Amhara. I think it's Amhara. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Amhara, the Amharic language as well. So, yeah, there's a lot out there. And I'm not surprised, by the way, that you're able to translate Medu ntr into various African languages, because people are looking around looking for the smoking gun. You know, is it Coptic? Is it this? Is it that? And in reality, it's my strong belief that ancient Egyptian, as it's written, was a lingua franca. And I believe that the reason they chose an abjad as opposed to an alphabet is because using an abjad allowed the ancient Egyptian language to be read in multiple languages and translated into multiple languages. And actually, if we use the ancient Egyptian language as a lens, I believe you're going to realize that many African languages are just dialects of each other. Which is, yeah, similar to kind of like I always relate it to the idea of Mandarin and Cantonese, which if you were none the wiser, you'd think they are two completely different languages, but they're actually the same language and just dialects that have diverged for a long period of time. So it's really interesting. I believe that's gone on in the African continent. So it will be interesting to see how our linguists and how our scholars relate the ancient Egyptian language. Khaled just said Tigrinya. I'm guessing he's saying that in response to what I said about Tiawete when I said it was Amhara. I knew it was Amhara or Tigrinya. I couldn't remember which one it is. So I'm guessing it was Amhara. I'm sorry, it was Tigrinya, not Amhara. So yeah. Mistake noted. And thank you for the correction. Okay. But I think on that note, we're going to get cracking with these videos because, like I said, really basic introduction. We've had a bit of a chit chat now. We're 7 minutes in, and I think we can get cracking with the video. So, and I'm probably going to let these play a bit more than I normally do without interruption, unless obviously things come up. I know people do get irritated. It's really weird because I do these videos and people do get irritated when I interrupt the videos and like, just let it play. And I'm like, dude, it's a 30-minute long video. I can't just steal people's content and just play it on my channel and let that be my live stream. I'll get struck. A, I'll get a copyright strike, and B, if you want to watch the video, just go to the channel and watch the video. So that's my warning to you. If you like to watch videos uninterrupted, leave the live stream and go and watch the video uninterrupted. Please don't complain that I interrupt the video. Okay, so it's a pointless complaint to make. Okay, so I'm just kind of making that. Kapruki, what's going on, brother? Good to see you, man. Let's go.
Look at them. The beautiful hieroglyphs of the ancient Egyptians. Aren't they just marvelous? I'm sure we've all been fascinated by them when we were kids, and some of us remain fascinated by them to this day. Yet I'm also sure that we've all been somewhat daunted by them, their complexity seemingly beyond human comprehension. That was indeed the case up until quite recently. For nearly 2,000 years, the ancient Egyptian language was buried in the sands of time. It's somewhat ironic. After all, ancient Egyptian was in use for over 4 millennia, longer than any other language in history. And it also boasts the oldest complete sentence known to man, this short inscription exalting the pharaoh Peribsen for uniting Upper and Lower Egypt.
Now, this is just an interesting point that I thought I'd pause on, because a lot of damage has been done to the timeline of the ancient Egyptian language by historians who are basically hell-bent on claiming A, Mesopotamia is an older language, and B, the cuneiform writing system predates ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, both of which are lies, like outright lies. They don't classify the pre-dynastic ancient Egypt as a civilization for some strange reason. Okay, even though they start counting Sumerian civilization literally from the date that it appears. So literally from the oldest day that they have a Sumerian people, they're like, this is the day the civilization starts. But when it comes to the ancient Egyptians, like, we know that there were plenty of like civilization periods predating what we classify as the first dynasty, where, you know, Kemet was clearly, well, I wouldn't say Kemet because it wouldn't be called Kemet, but the ancient Egyptian or the Nile Valley region was clearly operating as a civilization, and they don't count it. Not to mention the dates. There's a whole massive controversy in and around the dates to begin with. Like, the dates are not conclusive. I've got a book by an author called Anatoly Fomenko, and there are some people who classify even the first dynasty to date back as far as 7,000 BC. And there are others who date it right up to as soon as 1500 BC. There's all of these kind of conclusions that these Egyptologists come to are normally based on single pieces of text. And in the case of ancient Egypt, it's the Manetho's king list is the one that they use to do the current sets of dates. But that was one king list amongst many. So there's so much controversy. But the one thing that I think all historians know is that ancient Egypt predates Sumeria by several millennia. And the ancient Egyptian writing system, even before this sentence appeared, you have these same symbols being used for thousands of years, dating back even to the pre-dynastic. So they know, and they know that these symbols represented written language. So they know that written language in ancient Egypt far predates the Sumerian cuneiform, but they won't accept it. So that's just one thing I want to jump in and say. And someone did ask the question, and I was going to do that. I haven't put them in the description yet. I will by the end of the video. The video being being played right now is called How to Read Ancient Egyptian Hieroglyphs. It's by SideQuest Animated History. And I'm just going to pop the link in the chat because I think that's the right thing to do. So you all can access that. Don't leave the channel unless you actually, if you want to leave, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to pop it in the chat, and I'm going to do that with each one. Okay, so that you can access them or save the links or whatever. But I will put these in the description when the live stream finishes.
It is the ancestor to nearly all major scripts in use today, via a long chain of inheritance going through the Phoenicians, Greeks, and all the way to the Latins.
Now, I really want you to fathom that as well. Sorry, I did pause on this note because this is an understated fact. All writing systems globally descend from hieroglyphics. I must emphasize this. I'm going to repeat. All writing systems globally descend from hieroglyphics and thus descend from Central Africa. Okay, we have to understand the gravity of this detail that's missed out. I've obviously done videos about, you know, the Latin script. If you haven't checked those out, check those out. Those are pretty good. But I'm going to extend it, and I'm going to do the larger video showing how basically every single written script system that exists today descends from ancient Egyptian and descends from Central Africa, obviously, because the hieroglyphs, as if we're going to take the words of Diodorus seriously, we know that they were inherited from Ethiopia or Central Africa by the Egyptians. So it's really important that we understand that this is a massive, massive fact that people don't like to talk about for understandable reasons.
Now, the ancient Egyptians were a smart bunch and realized pretty quickly that hieroglyphs were quite cumbersome to write.
We're going to ignore the depiction of the ancient Egyptian. They got the hair right, but nothing else.
On a regular basis. So they developed a simpler cursive script they could use for more mundane communications. By the time our dear friend Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, this script had evolved into nearly a separate language called Demotic. Hieroglyphs remained in use for monuments and temples, of course, but there were fewer and fewer people who could actually read them. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy...
Just on that note, in terms of the amount of people that could read them, according to Diodorus, all the Ethiopians could read them, but not all the Egyptians could, which I find that quote fascinating. I'm sure many people in the chat could recite that quote word for word. I've used it quite a few times, but he essentially says, amongst the Ethiopians, the hieroglyphs are common, but amongst the Egyptians, it's only known basically among the priestly class, and the people use the Demotic script as the kind of the common script. So I find that little detail, that little fact, that little hidden fact, really, really interesting. These are the parts of hidden Central African history that you just don't get. Smash Rockwell's in the chat. What's going on, sir? That is your resident Medu ntr expert. If you want to take it to the next level, that I told you, this is level 101 here, the basics. If you want to start delving into the ancient Egyptian language and really getting that higher level of understanding, this is the guy who can literally read it off the walls. Very, very impressive. So yeah, welcome, brother. Let's carry on.
Took control of Egypt, and he liked the whole pharaonic treatment, so he pretty much kept the ancient cults and rituals intact. But his inheritors just couldn't resist adding their own Hellenistic twist to it all. And so they brought the Greek alphabet into the mix. Admittedly, writing out Greek names in hieroglyphs was very hard. This is how we get to the final stage of the ancient Egyptian language, Coptic, originally written out in the Greek alphabet from roughly the 1st century AD onwards. Unlike everything...
I'm just going to pause here quickly as well. And this is just a little tidbit I'm going to throw out. This one might blow your mind, or you might think I'm crazy, but I'm going to say it anyway. Consider that, or at least consider the question, why were the Greek rulers, the Ptolemies, obsessed with writing in the ancient Egyptian language to the point where they made sure that their names were inscribed, to the point where we have the Rosetta Stone? And I want you to consider that for a while. Why were the Ptolemies so obsessed with having their names written in Egyptian? Okay, I'm going to throw that question out there, and then I'm going to put this thought out there, and I'm only going to leave it there as a thought. Consider, after Egypt was conquered by Alexander the Great, and he set up Alexandria next to Egypt, and I say next to Egypt because it wasn't in Egypt, because it wasn't any of the nomes. So therefore, if it sits outside of the nomes or the Sepats, it should not be classified as Kemet or Egypt. It may be in the landmass that today we call Egypt, but in the time that Alexandria was established, it was literally called Alexandria ad Egyptum, which means Alexandria next to, or Alexandria near to Egypt. That's what the name literally meant of that city. So it wasn't a part of Egypt. But when the Greeks established Alexandria next to Egypt as their kind of proxy nation to rule out of, the question I'm going to ask you all is, who was the emperor of Greece? Because we know who the Ptolemies are, but can anyone tell me, for instance, with, you know, during the time of Ptolemy the First, who was the emperor of Greece? Put the answer in the chat if you know. And during the entire Ptolemaic period, I want to see if any of you guys can give me the name of a Greek emperor who reigned contemporaneously with any of the Ptolemies. All right, I'm going to put that question out there. I'm going to let it play. Feel free to pop your answers in the chat.
Everything else we've covered so far, Coptic survives even to this day. It did so by pairing up with Christianity, the big underdog in ancient history. When the Romans conquered Egypt from Ptolemy's descendants, Cleopatra and co., they too initially kept the existing religious infrastructure intact.
And that's leading on to the point that I was asking you guys just then. Okay, notice how everybody who conquers Egypt initially leaves the religious infrastructure intact. This is to do with what we call a high culture. Okay, the rule would be, or the genuine kind of theme would be, that when you acquire a higher culture, you usurp as opposed to erase it. And this is not something that happened like often, but this is what happened. So when the Greeks came into ancient Egypt, they didn't want to erase it because it was a higher culture, a more knowledgeable culture, okay, than the one that came before. So they kept it intact, and they ruled for a period of 300 years or so. And then the Romans overthrew the Ptolemies and the Cleopatras. And Petrina, I think, has answered my question. At least the answer I was looking for. And that's that Greece didn't have any emperors contemporaneous with the Ptolemies. And yet they had these emperors ruling in Egypt as Ptolemies and Cleopatras. So my next question to you is, what were they ruling? Because Alexandria was next to Egypt, wasn't in Egypt. Obviously they had control of Egypt, but what were the Ptolemies ruling? Where was Greece's capital during the period of the Ptolemies? It was the same place as Egypt's capital. So is there a big portion of history that is being obfuscated? I'm just going to leave it out there as a question. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions. I haven't done enough research. I've done a bit, but I haven't done enough research to formulate a response or a full theory. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. I find that quite interesting, that during the height of this kind of like Greek empire, after Alexander the Great, everything seems to be centered around Egypt for the Greek Empire, and yet we've never been told from that perspective. It's bizarre. I don't know. It's weird, but I just throw it out there. It's definitely what I definitely want some classicists to give me some more research in that area. It's very interesting.
But as the teachings of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, permeated the Roman Empire, the Romans became hostile to all manner of paganism, including the ancient Egyptian cults. When Emperor Theodosius abolished all non-Christian temples in 391, the use of hieroglyphs virtually ended, with the last known inscription dating a mere 3 years later. By this point, Coptic was the language of the masses in Egypt, a title it would retain well into the 10th century. And it was also the language of choice of the local Christian clergy. After the Islamic conquest, it survived as a liturgical language.
Now, to be clear, Coptic, from my understanding, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but Coptic was a bridging language between Greek and Egyptian. From my understanding, it never took a hold really outside of the Delta region, and was obviously heavily weighted in Alexandria and Cairo, as opposed to permeating all of Egypt. And that's from the research I've done. That's from my understanding. Like I said, I'm happy to be corrected there, but that seems to be what the role of Coptic was, and it's always had that that Greek relation. But obviously, it'll be very interesting to hear any feedback from people who have more information in that area. But I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Which, yay, Christianity, and became a crucial link in the rediscovery of ancient Egyptian. Of course, the literal cornerstone of the rediscovery is the Rosetta Stone, uncovered by our famous acquaintance Napoleon Bonaparte, when he was off on his own Egyptian conquering adventure. Bearing a Ptolemaic decree conveniently written out in hieroglyphs, Demotic, and Greek, the Rosetta Stone triggered a veritable explosion in the nascent field of Egyptology, first in France and then in Britain, where the stone eventually ended up after Napoleon's defeat.
And just a note on Egyptology, notice how it was birthed after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. So really that was the transition point between the Europeans considering ancient Egypt to be a backwards African society who basically did cave art and meaningless cave scratchings on the wall, to discovering that they had a very, very old language that seemingly was, you know, that filled with lots of ancient knowledge, which they scrambled to Africa, literally scrambled to Africa to translate as much of this written language as possible and to learn about this great ancient civilization and the birth of Egyptology, which we know is a gate more than anything. Egyptology was a gate where they controlled access, and that's why it was established. There was no other reason why.
And speaking of things being conveniently written out, we'd love to introduce you to our wonderful friends over at Speakly, hands down the best language learning app. Featuring a unique teaching method based on real-life situations, Speakly can help you and writing challenges to listen.
I ain't playing yet.
And here's the best part. Subscription if you visit, where were we? Ah, yes, the fabulous Rosetta Stone. You see, just the stone by itself wasn't enough to fully decipher ancient Egyptian, but it did provide the crucial breakthrough that hieroglyphs can be phonetic. This is where we have to get into the nitty-gritty of ancient Egyptian, so bear with me. In most languages today, the individual written characters represent sounds we can make, rather than entire words or other meaningful units of language. That's what is called a phonogram. For the longest of times, linguists believed that ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs were logogrammic, which is the opposite case, where characters represent objects or concepts. This assumption did make a lot of sense. After all, most hieroglyphs are literal depictions of objects. But because the Rosetta Stone contains Greek names written in hieroglyphs, and because Greek names obviously can't be written logogrammically, since they're foreign to Egypt, then hieroglyphs must have been able to represent sounds. This was the crucial discovery. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs were sometimes logograms, while other times they were phonograms. The ultimate eureka moment came when the link to the Coptic language was made. A French linguist who had learned Coptic from one of Napoleon's translators in Egypt discovered that phonetic...
So this is Champollion the Younger, who we were talking about on yesterday's live stream here. Well, I say we, Trill Black talks about him quite extensively in the video. So this is the one who, as well as doing a great deal, he's known as the father of Egyptology, and doing a great deal of translations of, well, I'd say decipherment as opposed to translation. He did a great deal of decipherment in terms of figuring out how the how Medu Neter, or the ancient Egyptian language, operated as a language. He also obviously advocated for a Black Egypt. So this is something like, on the one hand, Egyptologists are happy to take his decipherment of the of the Medu but aren't they also happy to take his viewpoint that Egypt was a black and native African civilization?
Hieroglyphs had a strong correlation with Coptic words. This revealed that ancient Egyptian was more complex than anyone had thought possible. It doesn't record vowels, only consonants, and only a small fraction of hieroglyphs represent single consonants, with many more representing 2 or even 3 consonants at once, on top of the thousands that stand for objects and not sounds. So, let's clear things up with an example, shall we? Let's say you want to write out the word cat. You can't use vowels, so you've only got a C and a T.
Now pay attention to this part, because this is good. Once again, if you're very new to the subject, you'll find this part very interesting and it'll be really useful and you'll learn a lot. So yeah, just pay attention here.
To work with. But then, how do you differentiate between cat and, for example, cut? And you also don't really have multiple symbols for the same sound. So you've also got to differentiate cat and cut from, say, kit, kate, kite, and so on. The obvious answer to this problem would be to invent vowels. But another approach, which our ancient Egyptian friends devised, is to add more symbols into the mix.
Also, just to be clear, the invention of vowels wouldn't solve that, because you'll still get words that are essentially homophonic. Essentially, they sound the same, they're worded the same, sometimes spelt the same, but can mean 2 completely different things. We have a lot of examples of that in English. So inventing vowels wouldn't solve this. So this actually makes you think about how ingenious the invention of determinatives, which is what we're going to come on to, was for the ancient Egyptian language.
Which don't represent sounds, but rather objects or ideas. In a more modern context, you might think of them as emojis. So, cat, cut, kit, kate, and kite would all be written out with the same 2 phonograms, and an extra logogram for context at the end. An actual example of this can be found in the Coptic Bible's word for salvation, probably pronounced as Ujar, where the first 3 hieroglyphs are unilateral phonograms, and the final hieroglyph tells us that the word is an abstract concept. Now, I say probably pronounced because we're not actually sure what ancient Egyptian pronunciation sounded like. Unlike Latin, where there's an unbroken chain of people speaking it from Roman times to this day, the 19th century linguists who reconstructed ancient Egyptian had no idea where to start from.
And I just want to build on that, because if you look around, you'll find videos that claim this is what the ancient Egyptian sounds like, and everywhere there's a missing vowel, they'll replace it with an E, and they'll be like hijit, mit, grit, bidibijidit, and stuff like that. And the reality is, and this is the reality is, they have no idea what ancient Egyptians sounded like. And my theory is that it's impossible to know what ancient Egyptians sound like, because it didn't sound like anything. It was a written language. It was a lingua franca. Okay, so you can take the same script, kanji script, you can take it to someone who is Japanese. Sorry, you could take it to someone who is Japanese, you could take it to someone who is Mandarin, and you could take it to someone who is Cantonese, and they will all read that script. They'll be able to translate it into their language, but they will all read it completely different. Like, they won't be able to understand what each other say, but they will be able to understand what is written. And this is what I believe you have with the ancient Egyptian script, because it was a script. It was something that could be translated into multiple languages. And if I've always been of the belief that the ancient Egypt was a conglomeration of ethnicities along the Nile, that over time there may have been a proto kind of ancient Egyptian language, but over time that would have split into dialects and split into many of the languages perhaps that we even speak today in Africa, many of the modern languages. So they've diverged. I remember languages can diverge. Consider the length of time that ancient Egypt existed for. We're talking several thousands of years. Languages, I mean, all Proto-Indo-European has completely diverged into all of the languages spoken on the European continent in like in a matter of like 1200 years. Okay, some people obviously say it stretches back, 2000 to 1200, but strictly speaking, the most dominant languages spoken now in the European continent, they've diverged from each other in the last 12 to 1500 years and can become completely different dialects. I mean, completely different. So it doesn't take a long time for languages to diverge, particularly if you have people separated by land masses, like you did in ancient Egypt. You would have had, people who, existed in Luxor. Yeah, they weren't seeing people in, Cairo or, Middle Egypt, somewhere, let's say, I don't know, somewhere in Middle Egypt. I can't think of anything right now. Memphis, okay, right on the border. They weren't seeing those people every day. And they had different belief systems, and their languages would have diverged from each other in the same way modern languages diverge from each other and become almost completely different languages over that course of time. But what would have united them would have been this written script that they could all translate into their own language, which I find quite fascinating that no one's considering that would be the case, particularly for a civilization that exists over such a large expanse of land over several millennia. It's almost inevitable that this would have happened.
The link to Coptic does provide good estimates on what ancient Egyptian would probably have sounded like, but we'll never likely know, for sure at least. Another frustrating practice of the ancient Egyptians was to be wildly inconsistent with the way they wrote down hieroglyphs. Depending on the scribe's mood, they could be top to bottom, left to right, or right to left. And the only way you could know for sure is if there were any animal or human logograms in the mix, for they'd be facing towards the beginning of the sentence. Oh, and do you remember how there were many
So that's critical. So that if you're not going to miss anything, don't miss that. When it comes to the reading direction that you read in when it comes to ancient Egyptian, you read towards where the animals are facing. I made a critical error yesterday during the live stream, and I was under a bit of a panic trying to read the glyph, which I read backwards. So I read Ptah backwards and I read Hotep, which was embarrassing. But it's the same, but you can see how I got there because it's the same vowels. So I obviously read HTP and I should have read PTH. So I made the critical error, which is like lesson 1 of not reading in the direction that the animal or the anthropomorphic thing, or whatever it is, the living thing is facing, because it could be an animal or a person. Whichever way they're facing, you read in that direction. So you read towards where their eyes, you read towards their face, if that makes sense. So this bird, a bird there, you'd read in towards the bird, not away from the bird. Okay, so yeah.
Human logograms in the mix, for they'd be facing towards the beginning of the sentence. Oh, and do you remember how there were many hieroglyphs representing multiple consonants? Well, ancient scribes apparently had very little faith in their readers, unlike us here at SideQuest, of course, for they'd often use a complex trilateral hieroglyph, like...
I think that's quite funny. The fact that he relates to the fact that the scribes would know that people would be too stupid to remember. Which is true, because look at all of us coming afterwards. We'd have no idea how to read ancient Egyptian if they didn't create these methods of basically breaking down long words. They really just left every clue for people afterwards to come and figure everything out. Yeah.
This one, for example, which means beauty and is probably pronounced as Nefer. But
now I know from Tiawate's video that Nefer in Tigrinya means flight, which is interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. If Tiawate's video was in Tigrinya, that's what he said. So he said nefer means flight. Yeah, we've always translated it as beauty. Oh, and here's one that will really interest you. This instrument, I think it's called the kora. I could be wrong. Don't hold me to that. But this instrument is depicted in ancient Egyptian artwork as basically being, I think it's depicted with nut, and it pierces the sky. So when you see it depicted, it touches the ground and it pierces the sky. So when I heard that the guy who has that channel, Tiawate, who said this translate as the word flight in Tigrinya, I just found that really like, oh, that's interesting, because that completely changes everything. Obviously the view that this means beauty is another thing. So yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
But would then also add the composite unilateral hieroglyphs afterwards, just in case. The scribes loved adding redundant hieroglyphs when they...
Can I just say, I am absolutely loving the knowledge that you guys are dropping in the comments. Please keep dropping it. This is what makes live streams like this worthwhile, seriously.
had empty space to fill in, or, to the contrary, cutting some out when they had to cram their inscriptions into tight spaces. Ultimately, ancient Egyptian was a hodgepodge of confusing practices and unnecessarily complex rules. And our general verdict here at SideQuest is that it's probably not worth the effort to learn it. I'm so sorry. But if you'd like to take a crack at some more reason...
Well, it's not worth it for you to learn it, but it's certainly, I would certainly give it 5 stars and say it's definitely worth it for you to learn it. Actually, a few people in the comments are asking me the questions, what's a good place to start? Like I said, I started with Wallace Budge, so I'm gonna unashamedly plug him. I see a few people recommending Gardner. You know, it sounds like it's, you know, I would listen to what Smash says if he's still in the comments, but if Smash Rock was in the comments, whatever he says in terms of learning it, I would listen to him because he's an expert. But I've got 3 books by Wallace Budge, and I can't recommend them highly enough. They broke down, like, in terms of how to enter it. There is a dictionary that I can literally pull up at any point and figure out how to say near enough any word. Yes, there's a little bit of outdatedness in terms of the translation of some of the vowels, but that's easily transmutable. You can easily push that, you know, left or right, so it's not difficult. So yeah, that's my recommendation. I will put links in the description to this video along with the links to these videos. Okay, so anyway, that's the first video done. This comment really kind of, this comment is amazing because he says in Igbo nefer means flight as well, which is so interesting because I'm just about to drop a video about Igbo being able to translate Hebrew terms as well. Mind-blowing stuff. This is why we need to reject Greenberg's language classifications, because none of these nuances are being picked up by people from us. It's got to take us to really research our language systems to make sense of them. We have to reject these kind of European constructs because they do not understand the interrelatedness of African languages. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out as a bit of a side note. Okay. Let's put on the next video. Okay.
Totally unacceptable for anyone working at the British Museum.
I thought she was going to be nice.
Okay, I've got to put it right to the start.
So I also don't know how to read ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
That is totally unacceptable for anyone working at the British Museum.
I thought she was going to be nice of the nerve.
By the way, this woman, Ilona Rogalski, she's a curator and she's really brilliant. I've watched a couple of her videos and yeah, she well, most Egyptologists do, especially modern ones, they do know their stuff. So it's quite interesting, but this woman's quite good. So yeah, anyway, I'm sharing the video now.
I'm Ilona Rogalski. I'm the curator for Egyptian written culture at the British Museum.
And I'm Nick, and usually I'm one of the people who makes these kinds of YouTube videos, but today I'm fulfilling my seemingly increasing role as the British Museum's official does not know how to read or write in ancient anything person. And Alona, very kindly, after so many of you have requested more instructions in hieroglyphs or hieroglyph reading, has said that we can have a go at reading this. Alona, what is this?
It's an easy start. This is a lintel that was set up as above a doorway, basically, with the name of one of the most famous kings of ancient Egypt, Amenemhat III of the 12th dynasty.
I don't know how to spell his name in English, but hopefully by the end of this I can spell it in hieroglyphs. Before we start, I'm used to hearing it as hieroglyphics, not hieroglyphs. Okay, cool, that's definitely wrong. That's definitely wrong. We haven't even started trying to read it yet and I'm already off. So what's the difference? And why is it hieroglyphs, not hieroglyphics?
It's hieroglyphs, it should be hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphic is an adjective, so it's like hieroglyphs, hieroglyphic, hieroglyphics. It's turning a noun into an adjective back into a noun. So it's better to say hieroglyphs for the noun and hieroglyphic for the adjective.
We're already doing grammar and we haven't even jumped in yet. Are we going to be dealing with any of that kind of grammar today with this wonderful thing?
Yes, absolutely. The beautiful hieroglyphs actually represent a spoken language, so there's a lot of grammar in there. I promise I won't overload you with too much grammar, although I love grammar. So.
I'm going to be honest, we have talked a little bit about this video beforehand. I know how much Alona likes grammar. This is a huge kind of moment of panic for me because I don't know that I know any grammar, but we will find out. So I'm going to take a guess and I'm going to use the only thing I know about Egyptian hieroglyphs, which is his name's in the cartouche, it's in the middle, because cartouche is like the only thing any of us who don't know anything about hieroglyphs know is like, that's how we started deciphering hieroglyphs. So his name is the circle in the middle?
Yes, so the decipherers also started with the royal name, so that's a very good way to start. The cartouche is basically a Shen ring. Shen is the circle of the world, it's eternal, it's never ending. And there's a lot of symbolism in putting the name of the king into that eternal ring, because they're actually saying the name of the king or the king is forever. And we see that it's a bit elongated to accommodate the name of the king.
So if it was being used as a symbol by itself, it would be more like a ring and less like an oval?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Right, in which case...
How do we read the royal name?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Unlike English, the individual hieroglyphs are not written after each other, but they are arranged in groups depending on the visual appearance of the sign, really, the size of the sign and the shape. So long, tall hieroglyphs tend to stand on their own, whereas smaller hieroglyphs, horizontal hieroglyphs, are arranged so that they fit in a square. This is a fundamental principle of Egyptian writing because it did have that emblematic display function as well. And so if you look at the first three hieroglyphs, you have an elongated long sign, which is a flowering reed. That's the letter I, E. Then the second sign is a men sign. This actually depicts a man gaming board. It's a game board. It's a game. And the game was called men. And so they start to use this as a hieroglyph in.
So it's on that note of the way the language is structured, and this is I hope you find this interesting, by the way. You'll find for a lot of the phonetics that this tends to be the rule. So for instance, the I, the feather that she showed, which represents the word I, the assumption would be the word for that would have started with that sound. They know this is the case with, I think, with the M. So the M, which is the owl, comes from the word for owl, which I believe is mulok or mulak or something along those lines, MLK or something like that. That's the word for an owl, or was the word for an owl in ancient Egyptian. So the letter M was represented by an owl. So you'll see this rule kind of play out. That's quite useful to understanding. Is that so Smash has just said this game is Senate, is that the same as Senate, the game that's here, Men, that she's called Men? Really, so once again, these guys are super knowledgeable, so watch out.
Any word that needs a men without referring to the gaming board. And then below that you have the water wave, which is the letter N. And the N enhances the pronunciation of the sign that precedes it. So we just read this.
So that's called a phonetic complement, where they place a letter or phonetic for a sound that's already been sounded out. We have this in the word kemet, where we have the M, we have the word chem, which is signified by that first symbol, that kind of jagged symbol, which signifies the word chem, but then we have the M afterwards, which gives a phonetic complement, which I believe was there to either help people spell things out or to provide emphasis on certain aspect of the word, or sometimes it aided with the understanding, because we know the T at the end of kemet was made it feminine, which I'm not going to go into all of that right now, but the T made it feminine, which made it signify that it was talking about an object or a thing, which is kind of what's argued. So yeah, it's very interesting how they use these grammatical tools within the language.
As Imen, which is a reference to the name of the god Amun.
By the way, I like to call the god Amun Amen or Amin. Amun is actually a more recent translation which relates to trying to make it sound out Semitically. You'll notice that a few years ago they used to call Tutankhamen, which is what I call him. Amen is the native African pronunciation for that. Amen or Amin in the the Meroites used to call their queens. Their names would start with Amen, the same way the ancient Egyptian rulers, and many of the ancient Egyptian rulers' names started with Amen, like Amenhotep, Amenemhat. You had the same trend carry on in the in amongst the Kushites, where they would call their queens Amen or Amani. Sometimes so we had Amani Reinas, which is the same word as Amen. So Amen, Aman, Amin, these are African pronunciations. Amun, not quite. So this is why I prefer the E as opposed to the U when it comes to mentioning that particular deity's name.
The owl can function as a letter M. So if your name is Maria, your name can start with the letter M. But in this case, it's a preposition and it means in.
Awesome, okay.
Underneath the owl in the cartouche, we have the hat, front, the word for front, which is the front of a line. So that is relatively easy. And it's followed by a T because it's a feminine word. It's actually a little bread, a piece of bread. And this is the feminine ending of the noun. So we have Imenem hat, and the entire name means Amun is in front of, or Amun in front.
Now, I would be really interested to know what Smash's translation of this is. Yeah, so Amen in front is the way it's translated here. I'm not going to argue for I am definitely not advanced enough to take a Egyptologist to debate over translations yet. But yeah, it'll be interested to know what someone else's translation of this name is. But there you go. You can see how it's made up. Amin. So we have E, min with the phonetic complement N again. So Imin or Amin. M, that's your bird, always represents the sound M. And then hat being here. But then we have also the T making it feminine, also potentially acting as a phonetic complement for the end of the name. So Amin, M, hat. Apparently. Yeah.
So I think I'm with you so far. Only question on this one, is there a difference in how it would be composed, as in the name within the cartouche, if it were to be on papyrus as opposed to stone, or is it always the same regardless of the medium?
Yeah, that's a good question. So hieroglyphs were mostly carved on monumental buildings, on temple walls, on walls of tombs. On papyrus, they would probably have written with a brush and ink, and it would look more like a handwriting. So the name Amen.
So I just wanted to note on that point as well, because I think sometimes people really struggle, to fathom the fact that evidence of written or writing in a civilization that doesn't carve their words into stone is really, really hard to find preserved if those people have moved on, or if that civilization has not been essentially upkept. And a lot of people find that hard. The only reason we have ancient Egyptian is because they literally carve their language into the walls of the temples, and those temples, because they were underground, evaded the destruction of the colonial powers and the people that came. That's the only reason we have it. When people make these arguments like, oh, where is that elsewhere in Africa, or where is that? Do you know how hard it is to find preserved writing? Do you know how fortunate we are, literally fortunate we are, to have preserved manuscripts and preserved buildings in Egypt? We are so fortunate. They, by luck and by God's gracious hand, have evaded the destructive hands. You know, how much, where is our proof of writing in Carthage, for instance? Yeah, Carthage was razed to the ground. We have nothing in by way of seeing, you know, what their day-to-day life was. And bear in mind, she mentioned it, and this is the key thing. Sorry, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I've mentioned this before. Civilizations are preserved only in really 2 or 3 kinds of buildings. Okay, they're preserved in the churches and the temples, okay, i.e. the religious buildings where the people used to meet. They're preserved in the palaces, and they're preserved in the the dwellings of the nobles, which are the palaces. Those are really the only places you get these big signs of civilization, i.e. statues, carvings, stone. Like, everyday people don't live in any civilization in huge stone dwellings. I must stress that everyday people in any civilization, doesn't matter where you go, do not live in stone dwellings. The only reason we have evidence of civilizations in any country across the world is because either the temples have been preserved or the palace has been preserved. That's it. That's it. Those are the only 2. So if you go to a nation and you destroy the palaces and you destroy the temples, there will be no signs of civilization in a few hundred years, because all of the houses of normal people will decompose over that time. So it's very easy for an invading force to essentially enter a land and deconstruct it and make it look like nothing ever existed there. You target the temples and you target the palaces. What did they do when they entered Benin? What was the first thing they did when they entered Benin? Yeah, and I have ancestry towards Benin. What was the first thing they did? They deconstructed the palace of the Oba, which they wrote down themselves had more material than the pyramid of Giza. And they said that not about the Great Wall, they said that about the palace of the Oba. He said it was so large, and they deconstructed it literally brick by brick. When the palace of the Oba in Benin no longer existed, and they deconstructed the Great Wall, and obviously would have burnt down any temples they came across, they essentially erased a civilization. There's no longer proof that it ever existed. So I just want you to bear that in mind. Remember that as this woman's speaking, it's really important that we understand that there's not many kind of places or evidences that remain of a civilization if you erase the temples and if you erase the dwellings of the nobles. But let me let it play on.
Would have consisted of the same signs, although they were quite flexible with their spelling, but they would also probably have written horizontally from right to left. So there's 4 reading or writing directions: horizontal, right to left, or left to right; vertical.
And how interesting is this? So this is the shorthand version of the ancient Egyptian script, and look how they preserve the cartouches with using these essentially brackets. I wonder if this was I wonder if these kind of like horizontal cartouches are the origin of the modern day bracket. Wouldn't that be interesting? Because that's essentially what I can see here. It would make perfect sense if it was, by the way. Because what's the rule of a bracket? Everyone, what's the rule of a bracket in mathematics, at least? The rule of a bracket is brackets go first. Okay, so you read the bracket first. So isn't that essentially what you would do with a cartouche? So it's quite interesting. There may or may not be any relationship between that, but I just find these coincidences quite strong.
In columns, right to left or left to right. You know how to read hieroglyphs by looking at the signs that have clear fronts and backs. So, for example, in this case, the birds. The birds will look at the beginning of the text. So you read into the signs. That's how you know where to start.
So does that mean that if, and I know I'm going to be asking a stupid question here without question, but, so we go cartouche, then presumably the lovely hawky boy on the big stone with the face on it. Professional terminology, I assume.
It's a face, yes. There's a face.
Okay, cool. It's definitely a face. That's always useful. And then there's a crocodile that's looking the opposite way. So do I skip the thing in the middle and then look outwards again? Or is it like from this point, just follow the back of the bird onwards?
Yeah, so here because we have an architectural piece that is supposed to yield the name of the king, they're a little bit more flexible with their spelling because it also has to look impressive. It has to look beautiful. So this is not just a piece of writing. This is a piece of propaganda, it's a piece of visual display of the building of the king. So here we have columns where you read each individual column depending on where the bird looks like. And you will see that the name of the king is facing the god Horus, and Horus is looking at the king. And in the other columns you see that Sobek, the laying crocodile, is facing the title of the king. So they're playing with the direction here. And that's what the Egyptians like to do. They like to exploit this opportunity. They like to exploit this very characteristic feature of hieroglyphs that they can move them around, basically.
Not to keep going back to primary school, which is the last time I had anything to do with hieroglyphs, not hieroglyphics. They always captured you because they're so beautiful and they're so colourful, but like there's a certain extent to which the ancient Egyptians were also aware of how beautiful they are because they're actually playing around with it.
Yes, absolutely. They are, each individual hieroglyphs is a piece of art, potentially, in my opinion.
And I would second that point really quickly. There's many places I could have paused it there, but if most of you would have been to museums, and if you look at a preserved wall with hieroglyphics on it, they are literally every single letter is a piece of art. They're just amazing to look at. Literally, like, they are awe-inspiring. And to consider that sometimes you get these entire walls or columns filled up and every single symbol is carved to be a piece of art. I was just looking at what they had there, and you saw the face glyphs, by the way, as well. Who she said, yeah, that's a face. There's very pronounced African features. One of their most common glyphs, I think it's called her as well. H. I think it represents the sound HR, and it's normally used to represent a person or a name. So you have the face glyph, very, very common in use, but always African in phenotype and African in character, which is very interesting.
But yeah, so this has not only the function of writing, this also has the function of display. It's part of a royal building.
It's suddenly becoming something, at least to my mind, that people actually made, which I know sounds really stupid, but like the way you describe it is like, oh, you actually have to think of the person, and you had to be of a certain skill, not just having the skill of carving and hieroglyphs in the first place. Do we know anything about their education? Did they have to go out and like do life drawing or something like to capture the essence, or would they be looking at this is a good picture of a falcon, just do that?
It's quite interesting because when they composed the hieroglyphic writing system, they looked at the environment, at nature, and they draw upon what they saw around them, the animals, the plants, the postures of human beings. So it's quite interesting to ask the question, how did they select something as a hieroglyph? There's actually not that much research done into this. But yeah, I mean, it requires a lot of practice and skills to be able to draw accurately and to make sure that a falcon is recognizable as a falcon.
I just love the idea of someone who's training to be a scribe has to go out bird watching every day, which is probably not what happened.
I don't think they would be sitting in the nature. They would probably go at other monuments and then try to copy them. So we have a few examples in Egypt where you see grid lines over hieroglyphs.
Oh, it's the grid lines, because there's quick flog for the exhibition. There is at least one example that I have seen in the exhibition, we should definitely come to, that has grid lines. I assumed that was a unfinished piece.
In this case it is.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, cool.
In this case it is, but so grid lines often mean that maybe the piece was not finished, they were still working on it. But in a few cases we have examples where the grid line was put over hieroglyphs, where it's clear that they did that to study usually something that is much older, because we are talking about 4,000 years of writing. So somebody like Amenemhat could go to a pyramid of the Old Kingdom and find an ancient monument and perhaps wanted to study some of the writing.
That's so cool. And so presumably put a grid system up. If it's really high up, you're gonna have to get your mate and a ladder or something. And then they would have what, like a slate, and then draw the lines again?
Yeah, like, this is usually, we don't have that very well preserved, but they were probably kind of books, example books, templates that sculptors would use to carve, to learn to carve. And also in the exhibition, we actually have a trial piece. So we have little pieces of stone with sometimes 1 or 2 hieroglyphs on them to show clearly that they were practicing. But even that trial piece is very beautiful. So this was already somebody who had a lot of practice.
You have a lot of artistic license, at least to an extent, as the carver then, to kind of, how do I want to express, as long as I say the right thing and I do it well.
Yeah, although the carver would have followed an example. So this inscription would have been laid out or drawn by a draftsperson first. So you would have the inscription in ink, and then the sculptor or the carver would come and he would carve the hieroglyphs according to the example that is already there. So he didn't have that much freedom, I don't think.
So someone would they be painting it on the face of this rock?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Cool.
It is a royal inscription, so they wouldn't take too many chances.
This is send me the email before you send it out and copy me in kind of
something like that.
Right, we're going to go out of the protective circle, I assume.
So maybe we should jump to the title of the king.
Okay.
So at the sides of the lintel we have the title of the king, which is the king of Upper and Lower Egypt and the lord of the 2 lands.
So most of you will know what this translates to. This is going to be one that rings a bell to everyone. This is the name or the title that goes with all, I'm going to say pharaohs, so I don't give it away. I'm going to see if who's quickest of the mark in the chat to tell me what this translates to. Well, what it says, first of all, in ancient Egyptian, and what it translates to. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with this. You always see this where you have a pharaoh. I say pharaoh because, yeah, very quick off the mark there. But I didn't really want you to do it because you know your stuff. So here's the question I'm going to ask you when Nefer Heru, if that is your name indeed, what does Nesut-Bit translate to, or Nesut-Biti? What does it translate to? The ruler of the bee and the ruler of the reeds. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay, nothing about the 2 lands or north-south. That's interesting. And obviously I'm never going to say I disagree, because I think people have their own translations, but that's interesting. So you've just got the bee and the reeds, which is interesting, because I always thought there was that association with the 2 lands and north south. But excellent, thank you for sharing that. Tawi is the 2 lands. Okay. Thank you for sharing.
The King
Super.
of
Let's
Upper and
carry
Lower
on.
Egypt is a little bit complicated. This is, of course, a very important title. It shows that the king rules over the two traditional parts of Egypt, the north and the south, which at a certain point were reunited. And so every king symbolically has to reunite the country by carrying this title. It's written with a sedge, a plant-like hieroglyph, followed by a T. And then next to it is the beautiful B. It's one of my favorite hieroglyphs. It's so beautiful. Also followed by a T. And the B stands for Lower Egypt, so the northern part of Egypt, and the plant symbolizes Upper Egypt. So in Egyptian we say Nesubiti. Nesu refers to Upper Egypt, BT refers to Lower Egypt. The T is the ending of the word, and what we don't see spelled out here is the E, Nesut BT. So that means the one belonging to the su plant and the one belonging to the bee. And that is basically the king. Nesut is also the name for the king in itself, so it doesn't always appear in this title. It can also be used on its own. The BT is a word that refers to the ancestor of the king. So the living king and the ancestral king together is the king of Upper and Lower Egypt.
But it's interesting there that the symbol that represents Upper Egypt can be used singularly to represent the king, but the symbol that represents Lower Egypt cannot. It really needs to be used in tandem. I find that quite interesting. That should be a bit of a alarm bell for everyone, in knowing that the symbol for Upper Egypt is sufficient, essentially, to say that you're king. That would go in line with what we understand from the Nama palette, from essentially from Upper Egypt being the I don't want to say the first lands, so to speak, and the Delta region being the conquered lands. So it's very interesting that phraseology, or at least that order, seems to be respected in the phrases that they use and in the language itself. So that's interesting.
I think I processed all that.
You can just remember Nesubiti as king of Upper and Lower Egypt.
No, and I suppose
I just got to thank you for Smash Rockwell. So that's put a big smile on my face, because he is our proper resident expert. So yeah, no, appreciate your channel. So thank you for the compliment, man.
it's something that people would have seen a lot, so you don't need to quite literally spell it out, do you? Because
Yeah.
it's something that
And it's so common that they also abbreviate it massively. Underneath we have Neptawi, Lord of the Two Lands. The basket is the word nep. That is a word that has many different meanings, and it depends very much on the context. In this case, it's a noun, and it means Lord, and it's followed by two horizontal flat signs which represent the land. It's a land sign. And ancient Egyptians didn't only have singular and plural, they had something in between which we call dual. I don't think we have this in English. A dual is two of something, and they can write this by having the noun followed by two diagonal strokes, or they can just repeat the sign twice. And this is what happens here. So you have Lord of the Two Lands. The nap comes back underneath the two lands. So you see Lord of the Two Lands is again followed by Lord who does something. The following I is a very crucial verb, the verb to do, to create, to make. And then the lintel breaks off, unfortunately. So we don't know what follows, but from parallel texts, from other texts and similar contexts, we know that probably this was the Lord making offerings. So the word for offerings may have disappeared here. So that iri is the verb to do, is written with the I sign. And again, you would have other hieroglyphs following to indicate the tense of the verb, which have disappeared here, unfortunately.
Getting some really good, I'm finding this very interesting, by the way, but also getting some good feedback in the chat. If you disagree with her translation, don't say she's wrong, just put the correct one in there. That's how we learn. So I think there's a lot of people, I don't doubt, by the way, that there are Africans in the chat who have a better understanding of hieroglyphics than this woman. I do not doubt that one bit, but we have to share that knowledge, let everyone else learn from, you know, what your proposal is, and help us to kind of like gauge why it's more sensible than what she's proposing, because that's how we learn, you know.
So the ancient name of the city where it was probably set up is Shaddad, and Shaddad appears twice in this inscription, and to make it easy for you, it's spelled twice in a different way, because the Egyptians like to do that. It's written in the column to the left and the right of the cartouche, where you see the falcon is Horus. He's just the main god of Egypt. He's the god of kingship, in fact. Inside the rectangle, you see a few hieroglyphs, and one of them is the face hieroglyph, followed by the heart. And the face and the heart, the combination is, again, a preposition and means who is in. So the face is a preposition that it has a lot of different meanings. It can mean because, it can mean upon, but together with the heart it means who is in, because the heart is inside the body. So you are really inside something. And the construction that follows with the face of a bucranium or something like this facing you, which is quite unusual for Egyptian writing, is a shrine that was probably set up in Shaddad and is a reference for Shaddad. So we have Horus, Heri-ip, Shaddad.
I mean, so you can see there, you've got a whole work of art there, a whole picture, you know, that's being you know, you have to, this is obviously a pictograph, so you have to understand, or have come across that before, understand what that represents. That might have been a symbol or a building that people who lived in the area knew and they recognized. So sometimes you did just have that element within the language. It's just, you know, it's such a deep and layered language. It's so amazing just to hear these conversations about it go along. But yeah,
that's Horus, who is in Shaddad. Shaddad appears again in the other column where you see the laying crocodile.
I also find it interesting that she translated the face to Heri, with the J as opposed to her, which I always had it as just the H and the R. Obviously we're translating to English anyway, but it's interesting that, yeah, these slight differences. I'm sure she has a reason.
On the shrine, and it is followed by a kind of strange looking horizontal sign that is a water bag, basically a bag to carry water, and it's shed, and it's followed by a T. Again, D.
Means that it's feminine, right?
Yeah, very good.
I learned one thing.
Yes, Shaddad is a feminine word because, in fact, like in many languages, names of places, towns, cities are feminine. So a lot of geographical references are feminine. In this case, you see the same shrine with the bull's head on top of it again, but here it appears twice. Why does it appear twice? Because this is a little bit complicated. It's Shaddad T, the one who belongs to Shaddad. And here we come back to your hieroglyphics, which is Shaddad is the noun, and they want to turn the noun into an adjective. They don't want to say Shaddad, they want to say the one who is from Shaddad or who is from Shaddad. And they do that by adding an E to the noun. And in this case, again, the E can be written with 2 diagonal strokes. Because they want to make it more visually appealing, they just repeat the shrine twice.
Oh, that's so good.
So the way the duplication of the determinative, in a way, it's classifying the noun, but by putting it twice, you actually turn it into an adjective.
So I had, and I'm going to be quite frank at this point, I was thinking I was going to get a gold star at some point for pointing out the relatively obvious, which was that is just a stretched out version of this thing. So I was thinking it had to do purely with composition. So I was thinking like, it wouldn't fit quite so easily and quite so clearly, because everything with the T, like it all fits in very nicely together. Clearly they thought about it, but it's so cool that they get to duplicate it, and then that's grammar. I can't think of a comparison.
It's what we call a Nisby adjective, if you want to know the exact grammatical term. But Yeah.
The audience definitely asked for more hieroglyphs, so we absolutely want to know that.
So what they're saying here is the crocodile Sobek is the one of Sheddet. So Sobek is the patron god of Sheddet.
That's really cool. And it does leave us with the long thin bit that looks a bit like a fancy candle. I'm imagining it's 3 sets of things, but...
Yeah, here we have a beautiful verb again. The column starts with a verb. It's the verb.
If you can't tell, Alona really likes verbs.
I like verbs.
She sent me a big email about verbs, not a cheat sheet for this, something entirely different. Absolutely loves verbs. That's why there's a big smile here. But anyway, sorry.
The verbal system is quite complicated in ancient Egyptian. So here it's the verb di, regi or di, to give. And what is the king? What is he giving, or what is he being given?
I am totally unfamiliar with that verb that she's just shown here. This D one. It's the first time I've ever seen that. Yeah. So there you go.
Is life and
we know that one's Ankh.
Prosperity, stability, which is the second sign is the Ankh sign, which many people may know as
Jed.
a sign of
I think that's Jed there. I could be wrong. I bet I'm going to get proven
life.
wrong.
And it's followed by jet.
Oh, no, I got it right. There you go.
The column reads di Ankh jet. And the jet pillar is a bundle of stalks put together, and it means stability. So the verb form, because this is an emblematic inscription, it's meant to display, they don't actually tell us how to read the verb. But usually in a construction like this, it's either to give life and stability, or given, who is given, which is a passive participle, who is given life and stability.
Awesome. And so, sorry, just to clarify, because I think I might misheard. So, Ankh, get, seen it before, know what it is. The symbol below it, I heard a pile of socks. That can't be right. What?
No.
Because it's the only thing I really, really don't recognize in all of it, which in itself I find really fascinating. It's like, okay, maybe not the platypus on a spit roast, but like everything else I kind of get.
Was anyone, it's not been spoken about for many years, but I remember a good long time ago, probably about 15 years ago, when there was this, where a lot of people in the African Egypt community were making Jed batteries. So this idea that the jet is a power, could generate power. And I think there was some videos in it back in the day. Maybe people could check it out on YouTube, see if they exist, where people were actually making Jed batteries. So this idea that they had electricity in ancient Egypt was definitely a thing. I think it's less spoken about now, but that Jed pillar does resemble to a very strong extent something that generates power. And if you kind of follow its construction, apparently you can to this day make something that generates power. But I just thought I'd throw that one out there because I literally just had memory from having a look at that Jed pillar and see if anyone else had ever come across that.
Except for, is this like a Egyptian tool, or like?
No, it's a bundle of stalks, like a kind of vegetation that is like something that you bind together to build, to make something more stable. This probably refers to the Egyptians, how they were building with organic material and were binding these stalks together to build houses or a wall or a fence or something like that.
Again, looking at it more and more, like a couple of things you've pointed out, like I probably would have said that the bee was a grasshopper, to be honest, but I knew it was a bug. Basket, I would have said it was a bowl.
The baskets, we have to remember that once upon a time, this inscription was probably colored, was decorated in a way that they would have been more recognizable. So the basket could have, this is of course we don't know for sure, but could have had some kind of decoration that would indicate to you that it's a basket. It's possible. So that would have made it easier for you.
Because it just looks finished, because it's just so impressive. So you do kind of forget that those things would have been painted, and not only.
I wonder what color they would have painted. I wonder what color they would have painted the her symbol, the face of the face. Answers on postcodes.
They would have been painted. There was probably texture that you could add.
Yes, yeah, the paint was not just for decorative purposes, it was also would give extra information about the hieroglyphs.
Running on from that, do we have many symbols where we're going like, okay, so we know how to read that, but we have no idea what that is? Or do they do symbols in like really abstract concepts very much, or is it much more here's a thing, this is what it's closest to?
Yeah, we have a group of signs in our sign list because we all use sign lists, and in the sign lists we usually organize the hieroglyphs according to categories of what they depict. This goes back to our predecessors. And there is one category that says unidentified. So there are hieroglyphs that we still cannot identify for sure, even though...
This is interesting. See, that hieroglyph is very close, but not quite, because I think it's slightly angled to the one that gives the kh, that kind of, well, at least that's what they translated to the KH sound. But yes, here's unclassified. So I think that one, the one that gives the KH sound, is slightly modified to that. Some of them, I think, say that one, is that unclassified? That's in a, sure, that's the, maybe they look like things that I think I'm recognizing, but I'm not.
In some cases we can read them. And we can read them because they are combined with other signs that give us clearly the name of the noun or the verb, but we don't actually know what they depict. There are a few signs like this. Not here. Here we know, we can identify every sign.
Oh, okay,
right.
so they're not
so all of that together.
We can try to read the entire inscription. You want to have a go?
I could do King of Upper and Lower Egypt.
Nesubiti.
Oh, you're expecting me to remember the names of the words too?
You just look at the hieroglyphs and read them.
Well, so this is the thing. I think the really
Just
weird
look
thing,
at the hieroglyphs
like
and read them.
just being genuine. I've got two problems here. One, a little bit ADHD, so like short-term memory not so fantastic. But the thing is that the concepts stick out really, really well. So I can do certain bits and not necessarily others. So, for example, I know that Horus is in Shedet. I know that because the heart is in the human and the human is looking out. So I remember the construct and the thing, and I also remember that this is Shedet, not putting a B in it. So we have that because there's a double Shedet underneath Sobek. I remember that it is Sobek who is of or from that place because they're doing the double line thing but they're doing it more artistically, so they're doing it with two.
Perfect.
Right, so I get
perfect
that
explanation.
And then we go for, okay, so Upper and Lower Egypt, as most geographies are, they are feminine. So they are both being underlined by the T, which is letting you know that that thing is a feminine. And so the weird flower is upper and the B is lower?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then it's Lord of the Two Lands, so they're pretty much just hammering that home. And then
I like the fact that Kenway is like, read. He's explaining very well, but he clearly hasn't retained any of the words actually said, which is funny.
He's going to do something. There's a verb. We didn't have time to talk about the verb because the stuff is missing, except that Alona always has time to talk about a verb, so I will never forget that an I is a verb. And then we move into this bit. I remember what they do. So they are provider of life. Oh, no, they're being given life and like stability because they're stacking up all the building materials in this one, giving life and stability. That's what the two gods are doing to our great mate here who I keep forgetting the name of. It's not Amenhotep, it's the other one. Oh, I keep forgetting the name. I'm really sorry.
Read.
Amenhotep.
Read the name, man.
It's the third.
The third.
They wouldn't indicate that they were a three.
No.
Okay. And then they are enshrined for eternity in a big circle.
And now for a professional reading and translation of the lintel of Imminent Hut.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there and I'm going to open up my stream to anyone who wants to venture a reading of this. We've all just sat through the same lesson. So if you're feeling brave and feel like you could put these words to use, I'm going to put the link in the chat now, okay? And I'm going to give some time for people to join. All right. So that's what you're here for. Yeah. I want to see if anyone can read based on the fact we've all just sat through the same lesson. What's the accuracy of the translation? I think I'm not an Egyptologist, so I'd say it was very good because I can't do a better one. But Smash might say it's okay, or he might say it's terrible. There's also when Nefer. Oh, Smashers Joe, my guy. Let's go. Let's go. How you doing, sir?
You there? You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. I can hear you now. I wasn't expecting you to join, man.
Yes,
What a privilege. How you doing, bro?
all is well. I want to tap in because this is wonderful. I'm so glad you're on this subject. You just inspired me to try to help brothers learn. So I don't want to spoil it and read that. You should let someone else read it. But I just want to say that I'm gonna follow this show once I get in the house right now with another show, following up your show, talking about ways for us to make this practical. But I just want to tap in to support and participate. But I don't want to spoil it and read it until I get in the house. Let someone else try to read it.
All right, cool. Feel free to stay on. If anyone else wants to join and to give it a try reading it, thank you for your feedback, Smash. You heard that there. If you're not subscribed to Smash's channel, get subscribed. And he, like he just said there, he's going to do some follow-ups to this. So he'll take you to lesson 2 and 3 and 4. This is just lesson 1, keeping it really simple. But is anyone feeling brave enough to join right now and to give it a try reading through these hieroglyphs? Is anyone feeling brave enough? You are welcome. You are welcome to try. When Neferheru, you gonna join? It'll be great to have you on. You seem to know your stuff. Anyone? Don't make me do it, because I think I could do some of it, but I think I've forgotten a good deal of them. Let me make it full screen. But it's boring if I do it. Come on. Oh, there we go. We got someone joining. Or Sir M. Carr. Let me add you. Hello, sir. How you doing?
In the top, brother. Smash, you ain't the only one watching. No, we hold on one second. Yeah, we in the building. We supporting you. Get it popping off. They look a little nervous to read it. Just hop in there. I'm gonna just help them out early. I ain't gonna do too much. I see where y'all going.
Go.
Let's
go. Okay.
Side, right or left, because it's a retro, right? We call it retro when it reads right to left and left to right. This one starts with, you know what? I'm not even going to do that. I'm not even going to start with the hieroglyph.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start here?
No, I ain't even going to do it because it doesn't start on the right. It starts in the middle and reads out, right? So most of the people reading this are probably thinking they're going to start with Nesut Beti, Neb, but it doesn't start there. It starts with these triangles. And it doesn't even start with the triangles. It starts with the Heru. And it doesn't even start there. It starts with the name, right? So when you see the Amen at the top, I'm not even going to do it. I'm going to step out.
Now you're going to do it. You're going to do it. You're going to do it. You're going to do it.
You broke down out. We nice with this. So I can even see that it's not Inu in here. I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to step out.
You know what you're going to do? You're going to do the cartouche and then you're going to step out because that's easy. But just do the cartouche. Come on, do it for the people.
Because you
do
see
it for the people. Come on.
You see the mirror, and I don't want to do that to them. Let somebody young come in here and get to the game. We want y'all that's watching this to come in here with our brother and show that when we do our shows, you're listening and you know what's going on. So I'm gonna step off. Imitep is going down. We watching you, brother. It's going down.
Nice one, brother. Nice one. So who wants that? Should we get started? Okay, you guys are making me do this, yeah, and I'm no expert. All right, I'm bound to make a mistake, but we're gonna start with the cartouche because that should be easy. Everyone should remember what the cartouche says. Okay, right in the middle. So let's start off with the cartouche. I just realized my cursor doesn't show up. So I'm all like, 1 second. If I, how do I make my cursor show up on this? I can't. Okay. All right, that's great. So my cursor doesn't show up. So I'm going to start with the cartouche. Okay. So there's first 3 symbols. 1 second. In the cartouche. Okay, we should remember those first. So the cartouche is the thing that's in the center. We should all remember that. Yeah, and that's the name of the ruler. Okay. So we have the I symbol. Okay. And then we have that game. Who remembers what the game was called? That Smash said was called Senet. Of course you can call in. I've got the link. The link. Should I put the link in again? Then I'm not sitting here doing this by myself. Oh wait, we've got one visitor coming. Kemway, how you doing?
King's monologue. Peace to you.
How you doing, sir? You okay?
I'm okay, man. I'm okay. I'm up here. It's an honor to be up here with you, man.
No, it's absolute pleasure to have you. I didn't want to sit here doing this by myself, man.
I got you a little bit. I can't top smashing Asar. I don't know why Asar didn't jump in, but I guess we'll give it a stab.
I guess this is very easy. This is low level for those guys. But it'll be nice to have people, even if we're gonna make mistakes, having a try or giving a stab at this translation. So I was gonna start off with the cartouche because that should be nice and easy, and then see where we go from there. I'm gonna add Smash as well, who's sitting out there in the lobby as well. Let's start off with the cartouche. So we first of all we have the I glyph, and then we have that game, which I don't think anyone mentioned in the chat. It's called Min. Well, she said it was called Min. Smash said it was called Senet. And then we have the phonetic. So yeah, the phonetic complement being the N hieroglyph. Okay, so that gives us the name, or at least Imen or Amen, as I like to pronounce it. Then we have the owl in the middle, which we're going to call M. And then we have the lion, who we have the front of the lion's face. So that gives us the word for front, which is hat or het, or I'm not sure exactly what the vowel is, but it's HT. Right. And then we have the T for the feminine afterwards. So then within this cartouche, we have the name Eminem hat, or at least the pharaoh we call Eminem hat.
Amen Imhat.
Amen Imhat.
However you pronounce it, but so understanding how you doing, by the way. I was just in the car. So understanding the meaning of Amen Imhat, like she said, Amen is in front. That's a harsh translation, but it does render what you see here. Amen being the foremost, or Amen is Amen is foremost, is how some may see that. How do you see that, Kim Way? Amen in the front?
Yeah, Amen in the front, or Amen is foremost.
Exactly. And so this is the same hot from hot shep suit, if you notice, right? And so then people will start to notice, there goes the same not recumbent lion, but the forepaws of a lion and a T when they see hot shep suit's name. And but I'll let y'all continue. I just didn't want to mess it up. I thought you would have beginners coming in to try, and I felt like we should allow. I know Kim Way's not a beginner, but since no one else clicked in, let's just read it.
Word.
That's great. Thank you. It will make the end of this show a little bit more interesting. So thank you for, and by the way, keep dropping that knowledge, because I think people, when they hear how these words are used in other contexts, really helps them to understand how the language works. So that was very, very enlightening. Even just you sharing that knowledge about being the same hat that's used in Hatshepsut. Very knowledgeable. So where would you go on from here? Where would you move to next on this text? I've done the cartouche. Where would be a logical place to move to next?
So now one thing you'll notice about a text like this is you did start. I would have started right where you started. Now, if you look to the left or to the right, you'll see two falcons both facing the cartouche. And if we investigate further, what we'll notice is the text kind of repeats and says the same things in either direction. And so you would start at either falcon and then proceed in that direction. You see what I'm saying? If you start with the left falcon, then you would start with that left falcon, go downwards for that column, then obviously to the next left column downwards, and so on. Because someone would mess up and try to read this across and not know that this is columnized.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the columns seem to be hidden, but if you try to read this horizontally, it would be an error.
see, and that's really enlightening what you just said there, because if you look at this text as well, you've got the one rule, obviously, when it comes to the direction you read, and is you read in the direction that the animals are facing or towards the way they're facing, and obviously they're facing both ways on this text here. So would that be your major clue that it's in columns, the fact that the animals are facing, we've got Sobek facing in the opposite direction of Heru here, so we know that they can't be on the same line, because you can't really have people or animals facing in different directions when they're on the same line.
Exactly. There's also a thing that we're learning about symmetry. They was big on symmetry, and if we step back a bit, we can see the symmetry here. They dividing it with the cartouche and doing saying similar things on both sides, and so if you chose one, you'd be very close to what's on the other side. I only see one little discrepancy. And no, it's actually identical.
Right, it looks like a perfect symmetry.
It's rather identical. So you just choose start at any falcon you want.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's start. Well, someone started. Well, Osir has started translating. Let's start translating that next line then. So we have the falcon at the top, who will translate as
to the left, or I guess.
Let's.
All right.
I'm gonna move left. Yeah. Now go on. I'm gonna move left and start with the falcon at the top, which I'm guessing we'd all agree would translate to Heru.
Heru. Yeah.
That would be HRW, correct?
Mm-hmm. Probably capital.
That'd be Heru.
Yep.
Capital H. Must remember that. Okay. Then we have the face. Well, yeah, we're gonna go to the face glyph next, and we're not gonna go to the jar, because remember we're reading in the direction of the falcon. So we then drop down, and the face glyph is the next one we're gonna use, and that's. She had it as Heri, but I've always had it as her, just HR. Is that correct, or would you have it with the J?
So there is Harry is good, but yeah, HR works as well. They kind of like mean two things. And so this one would be Harry. If you sometimes when you see it by your first, it could just be HR, because it is working with ib to form a statement of being in the middle. So ib, what we see to the left of it, looks like a heart. It's a heart, not necessarily a jar, but it is similar. One thing we'll notice is it's very similar in shape to the face glyph. And it could easily be confused if one did not pay note of the detail in the face and also the beard. When we get this combination, Harry, ib, it would also often mean in the middle. And she said the residence, and I'm just going to give us some evidence. We have to give people the things to refer to know we're wrong. There's a town called Athribis, but that's a Greek term. It's actually based on an ancient Egyptian temple in the Kim Ur-Nome called Hut Hari Ib. Now, Hari Ib is the same term we're scrutinizing. Hut Hari Ib literally means the building in the middle. Yep, the house in the middle, exactly. And so it was in the middle of Kim Ur. Now, if we translated that as the building, the residence, we would lose the fact that this was the city center for Athribis back then. So yeah, right here we got Horus in the middle of a particular temple, and I think that temple was.
She said Shadet, didn't she?
Yeah, I think that might be Shadet, but I see Shadet over 2 columns over, so I don't know which temple. He might just be in a hoop right here.
Yeah. So she said what she said, and you can tell me if this is correct or not. Well, she said that the reason you have the two temples later is because they want to turn it into an adjective, the word shadet. So they want to use the same word, but make it shadet or shadet with a Y to turn it into an adjective to make the sentence make sense.
Perfect sense. That's qualifiable. So then we would have Heru, Hori, Shadet, Dion, Jed, Shadet.
Oh, you go too fast. Go too fast. So I want to put the translations in the chat so people can see them. So we got Heru, Heri, Ib, Shadet is our next one. Which vowels am I leaving out for Shadet, or should I just write it in whole?
So I would just leave them all out for transliteration accuracy. I would just put the SH, D, and the T.
Okay.
And the SH sometimes a capital. So there are different transliteration systems, but in the one that's most standardized, a capital S will represent the SH sound.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I'm just going to put that in the chat. Feel free to correct it, by the way. I'm doing my best here. I might have made some errors there. Then we move on to the one with the triangle at the top. That's where you went next. So we had the triangle, which was a D. What was the translation for that word?
Means to give.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to emphasize is, and I had brothers who I debated with emphasize this before I got on the grammar, but the grammar is going to be the key to making this language functional for us. Like right now, it's kind of static and rigid for the people who learned it because they can't really fit their thoughts into the Medu ntr. But once we learn the grammar, and the reason why I start saying this with the word D, because this is one of those terms that will appear in certain. It means like to give, but then at certain instances, it will take another verb tense and mean to let, or it even might take a may I. You feel me? And so if we don't know the grammar, then we will be not knowing. We would just always give a dictionary definition and always say give when we see. Now give does work here because we see D jet. So if we know life is next, then we know that giving life sounds good. That's something. Now we learn things like, dang, it seems black people still say stuff like give life.
Facts.
You find statements similar to one love. And I'll quote a scholar from UC Santa Barbara, Daniel Selden, who says African American vernacular English is the only grammatical structure that matches the Medu ntr, and this is a PhD.
Wow.
And so this is going to let me take some license to teach it the way we teach it. So when we say give life, Dion, and then we got the pillar of stability, Ken Way, you could go right. Like I said, I didn't want to do this one too much. This. If we start teaching this, these will be like the elementary standardized things that we all know how to read just from a snap of a finger. Kim, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so next we got that crocodile on top of what I think could be called a shrine. And then I forget how she described that. I forget what this glyph represents, but that's the shadet right there. With the bread loaf under it representing the final T. And below you have the two emblems of shadet, how the King's monologue was just explaining. And I even remember from the video how she broke this down, and she was saying Sobek, Lord of Jedet. Although I will point out I don't know where how exactly she's reading Lord into it. But we do see the Sobek, we do see the Shadet, and the two emblems at the bottom.
So we have, so when she's put the Shadet before the Shadeti at the bottom, they would have put that there like they normally do, so you can work out what that symbol says. If you don't, is that why they would have put that there? So they've put it twice, but the first one, just like they do with Ankh, and then they spell Ankh out. Is that what they've done here, where they've done the trilateral thing, I think it's called, when they put the word, but then they spell the word out, so you know that the temple that they're referring to was a temple of Shadet.
It would make sense because it would definitely kind of correspond with the Y understanding, right? The Y suffix. and thus for make it a noun. And it's consistent with other like sportive kind
Now,
of writing. But I liked it what Smash got to say.
we should be careful because something is being revealed about this text. It could be periodization, or it could be. Here's the thing. I don't agree with her after reading this because we clearly see two different natures on top of the shadets. Like Heru in the middle
True.
of the shadet
Very true.
is
Yeah.
addressing Heru, and then so back shadet, that's saying they both. That's giving them similar reference. Heru gets the reference first, and then they're giving life. They're going to give life and stability. Whether it's to both of them. Next, we see so back shadet, and so one could argue. Now, there is the reason why I talked about periodization being key. If we go back into what they call Dynasty 00, these are dynasties that have been discovered to be established before Dynasty 1. We'll learn about a person named Horus Crocodile. Now, we don't find much on Horus Crocodile until we get to a place called Hoot Hori Ib. Now, it's funny that we got Heru Hori Ib Shadet right here, right? And another place where Heru is synonymous with the crocodile, besides in pre-dynastic times, is in the study of Athribis or Hoot Hori Ib, where we find Horus taking the form of a crocodile. So that could be significant. We throw that on the table. But one thing we would say is that why we would ask the scholar, why is Heru on one shadet and so back on the other shadet if we're not supposed to pay attention to that?
That's a very good point. It would be weird totemically, wouldn't it, for them to both be referred to as kind of the lords of a certain district or land in Kemet? Would you say that would be unusual normally? It'd normally be one.
Well, I don't necessarily want to say unusual. One thing I do want to point out is the difference is the two pillars under the column that has so back shadet. Those two pillars are not in the same column as Heru Hori Ib, and so there's some difference. But I think she was claiming that they was just repeating it just to be adjectival. That's all I'm disagreeing
But it definitely
with.
seems like there would be some. There's definitely room for some additional context. So that would be really interesting to look into for real, or to know.
Very interesting.
What I have to say.
No, brilliant. Thank you. Are you okay with my written translation that I've put there in the chat for that column?
Let me see. I can't really see that. And I gotta run into the kitchen. Kenway, if you could check it real quick, that'd be cool. I'll be right back.
Check if you're happy with that.
In the chat. Let me see.
It's just two above yours.
I think you got it. You got it on point. The only thing, the S, the capital S is like a sh sound in a system called manual decodage, and where they use capital and lower levels to make the IPA sounds.
Feel free to put the correct in there. Correct me, because I'm learning from you guys a lot today. Appreciate that. Let's do the last column now. We're there. This is it. And this is probably the easiest one of the lot. So I'm going to give you the floor.
And I think we went over this first one. It would have been cool if we had some new people jump on, but this is the hieroglyph of the king. So you got Nasut with the sedge plant right there at the beginning, facing the crocodile. And below that, you have the bread loaf, and then you have the B representing Upper Egypt, right? And the bread loaf under that. So altogether, you would read that as Nisut Biti, right? So that would be the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. And they have different explanations for it. I know back in the day, they used to say the king of, they used to have some different interpretations for it.
Brilliant. And then next we have Neb, which is Lord. which is symbolized by the bowl, correct?
Yep.
And then we have Tawi, which is a
Two-land.
plural of Tau, which means land.
No, it's a plural. Yeah, you said that good. So think about it. When you said Tau, see, Tawi is, when you see a Y, it is dual.
Yep.
A W is plural. So when we say we're taking the root ta, which means land. Now, if you say Tau, that's lands. But if you say Tawi, that's two lands. See what I mean? So this is Tawi, Tawy.
Brilliant. So Cyrus, just use the link. I'm in the middle of typing actually. Actually, feel free to put the translation in. Let me pop the link in for Sir Cyrus, and one of you could pop the translation for this line in. And then we have another neb beneath that. And then the I glyph, I couldn't remember what that translated to. Could someone remind me what that was?
Now you got neb wasir.
And that's part of another, that seems like it's part of another construction. I wonder what that might be for real.
She did mention that in the video. I can't remember what she said.
I don't think that would make sense.
But that's going to be neb wasir, right? You don't think so?
I wonder. So it would be king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Lord of the two lands, Lord Usir. It's possible.
Well, let me let people, and this is the good reason why I want to do classes to make this functional for us. Even when this cutoff, we'll know our options, and the grammar will let us know our use cases. Now, if this was to say, so here's one thing we're going to learn about the neb ball. The position it is in will let us know whether it's being used as an adjective or to say every or all, because it also means every or all, or it could just mean Lord. Now, if it precedes the noun, it means Lord. But if it follows the noun, it means every or all. Now look at the phenomenon we got here. We got two nebs with a noun in between them, and then a noun following the follow neb. So you got to ask yourself, is this saying Nisut Bidi, the Lord of all the two lands, and then starting a new text, a new statement that starts with IR, which is the I. That I we see at the bottom, it transliterates to a IR. It would mean to do if this was a verb, and if this is a noun, that it most often mean a wasir, a sar, Osiris. So now it could be saying Nisut Bidi, Lord of the two lands, Lord Wasir, which would be a perfectly good, but we don't have the rest of the text under this to know whether this neb is actually associated with the Tawi. And I'm just going to tell you from they're not, I think this is a neb wasir, because we know these statements and we'll become familiar with them. And normally when we see this, they don't say Lord, they don't say neb Tawi neb. You just normally like neb Tawi, the Lord of the two lands. So our familiarization, and we got to remember too, no new ancient Egyptian texts are being produced. A few are, hundreds are not published yet. But for instance, once you learn it, it's just like knowing a Bible verse. Some people say John 3:16, the Lord is my shepherd, or whatever. I might have messed that up. But God so beloved gave. That's what God so
Backslider. Sorry, go on.
Text in this similar and it's type of, they got coronary text, they have all these different type of texts, and we'll basically remember the formulas, and it makes it easier to read.
Brilliant. All right, so let me just quickly give you on that translation, because I want to kind of close up there. Let's say it was neb wasir, I think is what you said.
That's an option, but since the text is cut off,
I know it's just a guess. I know it's just a guess because we can't see it. But I want you to tell me in full then what that sentence. So we got the Lord of the two lands, and then we got a new sentence, neb wasir. How would that translate? so
It
everyone
will be
understands.
the Lord of the two lands. It will be Nisu Bidi, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, the Lord of the two lands, the master. Since you don't want to repeat words, you find another word that means Lord, just to be a wordsmith. You know what I mean? It would be like the Lord of the two lands, the master Wasir, or you could say the Lord of the two lands, the Lord Wasir, to be academically astute and correct.
You know, we do that in Nigeria a lot, you know. You know, you can't use the same word when you're reeling off your titles to someone. You got to change it up. So this is a tradition that they've kept up. You know, I'll say, you know, his face show, his shoe shine. No, move on. Come on.
I mean, just for accuracy, I just want to add, and thank you for having me. And I just want to add one thing we left out was the fact that the shinu in the middle where we started is sitting on a nibu, a golden neck piece. And we completely left that out. I don't even think did she.
Where is that? Sorry, point me in the right direction.
So if you look directly center screen,
yep,
and then go under the word hot, now you see the shinu was actually sitting on something.
Oh, so the cartouche is on top of. So I did notice that.
Yeah,
I did notice that.
And that is a golden neck piece, the word nibu. And so since Heru in both directions is the next word, they could indeed be talking about the golden Horus within the Shadet in the middle.
Yes, that's actually a good point, because that's something that you notice a lot in African art, in African graphic art, especially like symbolism and stuff. A lot of times messages and little symbols are just right in plain sight, you know what I mean, and you would just miss them if you're not pointing in the right direction. So I think that was really dope.
Well, I think that's a really nice place to close, because actually one of the things that I was having a discussion with a friend about the other day was the fact that in doing all of this, and this is obviously majorly important, being able to translate this text, there's also the aspect where we can't take the language too literally. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think being able to read it as well as being able to, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but being able to kind of resonate with it, because there's that aspect that I feel is left out by Egyptology, i.e. that kind of like Smash just said, you know, you've got this symbol that sits underneath it that kind of changes almost the whole complexion of the text that you're about to read. And I feel like there's this kind of metaphysical layer that sits beneath all of the Medu Neter, where it's kind of like, yeah, you've got the literal meaning, but then there's also a feeling that each kind of wall or each kind of like presentation of text is trying to give you, that kind of goes outside of the literal language itself. And that's just something that I find, I feel that is definitely something that I feel there's like a spiritual layer to the ancient Egyptian language, at least from my perspective.
No, I agree. Even in the video earlier, I remember the guy was saying that, you know, a scribe would write depending on his fancy, this way or that way or that way, and you know, and it's fancy, but you know, like you said, is every item has a spiritual meaning, you know, has its own kind of energy and its way of harmonizing with the rest of the text. And I think we have a good opportunity to be able to pick out on that than a lot of other folks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm very excited for obviously scholars like yourself and Smash who are doing this groundwork with primary text, because I think that as a people, we're going to derive so much more value when Black people, Africans, melanated people actually take the reins when it comes to translating these works. Because I think there's just, I'm seeing it even in the work that I do with the kind of like with reconstructions and with the artwork. And I feel there's things that I can understand, like with my documentary on hair and crowns and stuff like that. These are things that they'll just never get. And I don't mean that in a rude way, but there's no way a European could ever come to that level of understanding, because you're not this is our culture. Do you understand? So it's like there's a layer in which you're always going to be limited to it or interacting with it on a very literal layer. But then people who are actually from those regions, people who've actually been raised and actually carry those cultures kind of endemically within them, will connect to it in a different way. I'm speaking a lot more metaphysically than I normally speak on this channel, by the way, but I just felt like I wanted to share that.
Well, let me give you something physical with that in my exit, and I'll say thanks for having me. You're 100% right with that. I could give you an instance of that. Me being an urban wordsmith, I'm in the hip hop, right? But I'm also in the ancient Egypt. And so when I started going through text, I would instantly notice the wordplay, and then I would start to see if scholars is actually speaking on the wordplay. Now, one text, anybody in their free time, go back over an ancient text called the Cannibal Hymn, and you'll find out that all the literary devices are the same literary devices used in modern hip hop today, where the epitome of getting rid of your enemy is to devour them. We call it eating MCs, right? See, but no one takes that as cannibalism, because we are literally saying we're eating, I'm gonna eat you. Oh, you got ate. Oh, even the kids now saying you ate that when you did an action. Well, it was similar in the Cannibal Hymn, where he went through eating the Necharu, eating their kids, and he's going to be the biggest and the baddest, almost like an LL Cool J on I'm Bad, right? But they did not understand this cultural perspective of where it just was like, yo, the best way to get rid of the enemy is through devouring them. Right. We still rock that to this day. So I just wanted to point that out. Also say thanks for opening up the chat and letting me come on. I'm gonna follow up your show with another show to just show what you just inspired in me. You made me think about, I want to teach 1,000 brothers how to speak functional, not static Medu, but functional. Like, y'all want to go to the store? If you want to, you know what I'm saying? And so thank you for that. I'm going to tap out. Peace.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you, Smash. Seriously. Thank you.
I'm going to follow up right behind him, man. Thank you for letting me up. And, I'll be following your works like I've been doing, man. And keep at it. Keep at it. Hotel.
Pleasure, bro. Thank you for joining me. And thank everyone else who has joined me, even the hater in the comments talking about, you can't pronounce it, bruh. It's not your tongue. It's the Mediterranean. Stop. It's not the Mediterranean, first of all, okay? The Nile Valley has got very little to do with the Mediterranean. I always say that there are no gnomes along the Mediterranean. There are no Sapats along the Mediterranean. Ancient Egypt had as little contact with the Mediterranean coast as possible. And the first Mediterranean city that was set up by Alexander. So first of all, get your facts straight. Colonizing Europe is at least close to the Mediterranean. You Nigerian Bantu. I'm sorry, there are no Bantus in Nigeria. You got that wrong as well. Yeah, so, keep up with your African hating. It's not going to work. We are just levels above, man. So yeah. Keep hating. I love it. You're just driving numbers and driving traffic and driving attention to this channel, because we are going to keep doing what we do on this channel. And I've had a fantastic stream today. And look, 2 hours. I know it's still a bit long, but it's shorter than the average stream. And I'm really happy to wrap up today. Let me know in the comments, has this been useful? I'm not going to do these kind of videos like super often, but I just felt like it would add a bit of value for us to maybe, for those of you who never had any introduction to the language, to maybe take that first step. And I thought that these were really good videos, so let me know. Hit the likes up. Make sure that you have got the notifications for I think I've got another live stream tomorrow. Make sure your notifications on for that. Told you I'm going to be hitting the live streams quite a lot this week. So tomorrow will be my third in a row. And then I think I've got one early next week as well. So hit up the likes, make sure you got the notifications, and have a fantastic evening, everyone. I've enjoyed myself, and yeah, the knowledge that you guys are dropping in the chat was very helpful for everyone who tuned in. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. Paul, Peace, Tracy. I can't pronounce that one with the archers, but Usual, Muzzy, Wildflower, Abella, Pepperin. What's going on? Abella, like, there's too many people. Thank you guys all for joining. Kemway, Paul, Sir Cyrus. Next time, bro, I did put the link in and you didn't show up. I don't know what's going on there, but next time, don't worry, we'll get you one. Okay. Blessings, everyone. Have a fantastic evening, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.